We can go ahead and get started. So with that, my name is LJ. I'm an admissions officer here at Rhode Island School of Design, also known as RISD. And we're here gathering this evening to talk about the college essay. We'll go through some tips and tricks. And what even is a college essay? And with me, I have my colleague here tonight, and I'll pass it off to him.
Hi everyone, welcome, welcome. My name is Zach Davey. I am also admissions officer at RISD, and I'm also alum from the school. And I'll be behind the scenes answering everyone's questions. So if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A chat. We do have a larger event today, so if you all wouldn't mind, please type it into the Q&A tab, not the chat box. There's a chat box, and then there's one that says Q&A on it. But we ask they use the Q&A one just because it's a lot easier for me and our mystery guests to make sure we get to everyone's questions and respond to them in the chat. So yeah, that's it for me. Feel free to ask away your questions, and I'll pass it back to you, LJ.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your help here this evening. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that way you can all see all this information that I've got here this evening. Zach, would you be able to let me know if you can see this okay, if this looks all right?
That's great.
Okay, perfect. And as I get started too, I'm going to turn off my video. I find it to be a little bit distracting. I talk with my hands a lot, so I want to make sure you're focusing on the perfect content here. So with that again, welcome everybody to our third installment of our application prep series. Maybe you've joined us for our previous two before, but we're here tonight to talk about writing your college essay. Again, my name is LJ and I am an admissions officer here at RISD. Just a little bit of context of maybe how I'm here talking about this essay here. So maybe before we really get into it, no need to maybe fervently like write some notes. This presentation will be recorded and we'll put it up on our RISD YouTube channel. But for some reason, if it doesn't happen in like a super timely fashion, you're welcome to email us for a recording at admissions@risd.edu as well. And that also is true for our previous application prep webinar. So if maybe tonight is your first night joining us and you're wondering what is an application prep, you can see here we've got about 7 or so different offerings, 2 of which are for transfer students. We had our sort of first one focused on the first year application. So if you want to get a little bit more into that, I really recommend checking that out again on our YouTube channel, where we will record and post all of our webinars. You can see the rest of the dates scheduled for the last handful there on our website, where you likely found this one here, which is on risd.edu under admissions, and then you can go to info sessions and you'll find all of these scheduled webinars and more too. And then just a little side note, the second and seventh application prep are specifically for transfer applicants. So you're welcome to join these, but if you're, really focused on the first year app, just keep that in mind. And we do have one that was specifically for parents as well. So if you want to know a little bit more about how you can help guide your child through the application process, I certainly recommend checking that one out too. So that sort of is a little bit of an introduction, enough there. Today we'll be, again, sort of talking specifically about writing the college essay. And what we'll cover is a little bit about how to get started. Talking about, you can see here, essentially like the 3 T's of writing an essay, which are our tone, topic, and technique, and how to use those in your writing to navigate the essay process. We'll provide some resources and sort of some wrapping up, and then we'll end with a question and answer. And I certainly want to leave a good chunk of time to get your questions answered. Again, we've got a nice group here with us this evening, and I know it can be kind of rare to maybe be talking with someone. We're not one-on-one here, but in a degree, sort of about the essay. So I want to make sure that we've got a good amount of time for that. And you'll probably, just a fair warning, hear me talk a lot about authenticity and honesty throughout tonight's presentation. And so I want to maybe introduce those right off the bat to get you thinking about maybe what that means and how that can kind of resonate with you in this moment and help sort of guide your experience through what we're talking about. They're really important qualities to bring to the college essay, but really in general, the entirety of your college application, whether or not that's the portfolio or even just the sort of odds and ends there, or just like your life at large too. So again, honesty, authenticity, tone, topic, and technique. I think those are maybe the five keywords of tonight's presentation. So tonight we'll certainly discuss a handful of things not to do, but I really want to focus on what you can do to sort of get started in the right direction, to kind of really put together an essay that feels so like something you're proud about and something that really speaks about you and sort of feels I don't know, like you're having the confidence in it to sort of strengthen your application. In order to kind of help take a little bit of stress out of the process, we know that writing an essay or even putting together an application can be a little bit stressful or feel like there's some pressure or sort of a lot of eyes on you. But I really want to sort of break down some of those ideas or preconceptions about it and make it as accessible and sort of stress-free as possible, because I think that's where the sort of best stuff will kind of come out of too. And just as a little aside as well, I think this webinar is a little bit more broad than writing college essays specifically for RISD, since we don't have our own specific writing supplement. But whether or not you sort of take RISD as a sort of guiding point for this, or even if you don't even apply to RISD, I hope that this can be applicable to what you're thinking about when applying to schools. But okay, so maybe to sort of get really started here, you might be wondering, what role does the essay play in a review? Um, what do colleges maybe in general emphasize when reviewing applications? And again, where does the essay kind of fit into that? And sort of what I was just sort of touching base on here is that I think it's important to acknowledge that the Common App personal essay is submitted to all of the schools that you're applying to. And that's again what we're talking about here tonight, since we don't have a specific writing supplement. And at most colleges, the essay will be heavily relied on to understand who you are and what you have to offer. Colleges will often first assess an applicant's ability to be successful by reviewing the academic record and then kind of pairing that alongside with the essay. The essay can certainly be the thing that really helps an applicant emerge. I think that's very true for schools, again, that maybe don't have a sort of portfolio requirement. So you might be interested in other kinds of programs. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, how other schools might be really relying on this essay. I think when it comes to art college admission, the relationship to a reviewer's essay, to the essay that you're submitting, is a little bit different. Specifically for RISD, the portfolio is a consistent and sort of really strong indicator of a student's success at RISD on our campus. So, that means if your portfolio is highly rated in our review process, you'll likely do well at RISD. So that means while other schools maybe are really dissecting this essay, we're really looking into the portfolio, and then sort of shifting to academics and then to the personal story, which will be through recommendations and the essay. So I want to let you know that, because a really strong portfolio will certainly, again, sort of pull our attention. The essay can certainly wrap everything up together, but it doesn't have as much weight in the review process as it might be elsewhere. So, a good essay can be exciting and entertaining, but the best essay in the world isn't necessarily going to rise above a mediocre portfolio or weak academic performance. But that's not necessarily to suggest at all that your essay doesn't matter. It certainly does, right? Everything that you submit matters. But again, that sort of portfolio or the context of the review is slightly different when it comes to art college admissions. So then what can you sort of imagine about the essay, right? What are we thinking about when we're reviewing the essay? The really first thing that I hope you'll kind of consider is that it's a one piece essentially of a larger puzzle. Especially when we're reviewing applications, we review them holistically. So we're taking in all things into consideration. So your essay might give us some information that we might not have gotten elsewhere, and then that can provide context for your academic record or your personal experiences or the extracurriculars or portfolio, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I really encourage you to think about your entire application as a story, where this is one of the greatest kind of opportunities to tell the admissions committee something that we don't know, but need to know about you, something that you really want to show the review. You should look at your essay kind of as the foundation of the story, or even like the glue that might fuse those, again, academic and personal attributes together. The essay can certainly provide context, and I really recommend you use the essay to do that. It's really also your only opportunity to talk to the folks who are reviewing your application, right? It's our one opportunity to hear your voice and hear what your thoughts kind of sound like. Of course, if a school has an interview process, that's slightly different, but we don't. So again, it's really the only space where you can show your voice and how you think or talk or approach exploration to a degree. So I encourage you to consider that too, and I'll touch base on that when it gets to tone. And then here is another thing I think to consider is really putting yourself in an admissions committee, sort of where someone needs to lobby for your admission. Your essay can build onto that argument. It can help kind of connect those pieces and help us really advocate for your application. It can certainly add texture too. So your letters of recommendation or your activities might highlight that you're a leader. Maybe your essay can really drive home a very specific example and how to sort of build on that. Ultimately, you really must think about how your essay correlates with the rest of your application and the story that you're trying to tell, almost like a piece of artwork, if you will. So again, how can you get started with the essay? And really, I think the three T's that we're sort of talking about tonight will help you get there. The first one of those T's is tone. So the basic kind of definition of tone is the general character or attitude of something. In this case, that is of your writing. So your tone should really become a reflection of who you are. And this is where I'll really get into authenticity and really be sort of talking about that, because you want to make sure that your tone is authentic. So use your own voice, your own sense of humor, your natural way of speaking. We can certainly tell, and I think maybe you might not recognize that, but you can tell when a writer is not being authentic. Um, inauthenticity doesn't necessarily create the best story, right? It's not a very strong story because it's not something that you can sort of put your whole chest behind, if you will. So check to see if your essay is maybe over edited and maybe you're really relying on a thesaurus. So I think you can start by thinking about tone by assessing if the words that you're using in the essay feel authentic to you, right? Do you usually use words like delve, which is one that we're seeing a lot, myriad or whilst, for example? I think a really great way to check the tone of your essay is to read it out loud, whether or not that's to someone else or just to yourself. You can read it out loud and then maybe record it and play it back. If the words don't really flow easily for you, then I think that can showcase an area that you might need to improve on. You want to make sure that your voice is coming through in your writing, much like, again, other aspects of the application too. It can be kind of attempting to adopt a style of writing that might work for others, or even things that you might aspire to, or a style that fits a cliche or assumption of what we all think a college essay should be. I think, again, because sometimes there can be a little bit of pressure on these things, on these essays and applications, it can be tempting to maybe project that pressure into the essay by adapting a voice of sophistication or thinking about coming off as an intellectual or something like that. But in reality, what will make your essay strong is your truth, right? So we're not looking for you to be speaking or thinking or, again, writing in any specific way. On a similar note, which I think is important when talking about tone, and I'm sure you're hearing this a lot, or at least I hope you are. But for the life of you, please do not use AI to write your essay because it strips every ounce of uniqueness from your words. Right? AI is something that is impersonal way of speaking. So there's no such thing as good writing, at least in my imagination. Good writing can look like a lot of different things. And I think AI tries to implement in a sort of really specific or narrow view of good writing onto everyone through tone and even grammar correctness. But good writing really varies from person to person because good writing, much like good art or good anything in this sort of life, really comes from the heart. So that's my little speech to really believe in yourself, and sort of step away from using that voice that might come from AI or some projected idea of what we're looking for you to be writing like. I certainly recommend being overly opinionated or self-righteous too. Again, you're joining a group of people when you're coming to school. So all those people are coming with different perspectives. So you just want to showcase an open-mindedness too, which maybe that gets a little bit more into topic. But again, thinking about tone can really help to drive some ideas about who you are through the essay. How can you define your tone within a larger set of people? Here, encourages you maybe to think about, are you a leader? Are you contemplative, an empath, an educator? Consider using some adjectives about yourself, really getting deep into how you come off in the world, maybe talking through friends or family members with this one to help identify the tone with which you want to sort of use your essay or sort of guide within your essay. Right, like someone who is empathic will write very differently than maybe someone who's thinking about leading. And I think tone really relates to topic, kind of as I was just saying too, right? And so when it comes to topic, you can start with an essay from the Common App, which I have them listed on the next slide. Or you can pick one of your own, but I really encourage you to not overthink it. Again, some of the very best essays come from pretty ordinary topics. Most of our lives are pretty ordinary. So even if you don't feel like you have anything really strong or essay worthy going on, I encourage you to sort of take a step back a little bit and think about how you can find some interest even in the day to day. So here's the full set of essay prompts for the 2025-26 Common App. I won't read them all, but you're welcome to peruse them here as I'm sort of talking. Whatever you end up choosing, again, I really encourage you to make your topic personal and think about how it connects to the broader themes of your application, or maybe the theme you're trying to establish in your essay. So maybe you want to send a message about being resourceful or being a leader or curious, frugal, introverted, but somehow drawing a lot of attention to oneself. Again, how might your topic relate to your activities or something that you anticipate surfacing within one of your letters of rec? And please spend less time sort of on the fluff, right? I heard this a lot in high school too, right? Cutting out some of those fluff sentences and filler sentences and really focus more on the sort of story of purpose or your strong point or growth that you're trying to make in the essay. I really encourage you to take this advantage or this sort of opportunity of choosing your own topic to give your application dimension. We understand that you're interested in art when you're applying to an art school, since you're submitting that portfolio as well. And again, I understand this is being submitted to a wide range of schools, but if you're applying to mostly art schools or art programs, I certainly recommend taking advantage of this essay to, again, show a different story about you. Something that, again, can add some dimension that we can't necessarily find from your portfolio or from your story that you're showing in that portfolio too. Um, I think too, definitely try to step back and lessen some of your anxiety over the essay. It can be overwhelming to write a college essay, and we all get these sort of, again, ideas of needing to be grandiose, but some of the strongest essays I've read take a really mundane experience and turn it into a place of reflection or of growth. One essay that I read last year, I remember a student sort of wrote about the being in the middle of a tennis match and feeling like time was standing still as as she was sort of gearing up to hit that tennis ball across to her partner on the other side of the net there. So think about maybe how, what you have going on in your mind and again in your day-to-day experiences too, because I think there can be really something there. And a note too about this last common essay prompt option. That is share an essay on a topic of your choice. It can be one that you've written or that responds to a different prompt, etc. If you're submitting something maybe that you've already written, I really encourage you to think about how it can apply to your college application. Sometimes we'll see applicants just sort of have their copy and pasted maybe art history essay or analysis of a specific book that maybe it was for English class, but I encourage you to maybe take a step back and again, think about how that relates to you, right? Sometimes if something is overly analytical, it ends up being about what you're analyzing and not necessarily telling us a story about who you are. So if you're thinking about submitting something you've already written, again, consider how it can add some of that texture or dimension to your essay too. And overall, focus on maybe some deeper themes. We're really looking to learn more about you as a person and what makes you tick. Maybe consider what's brought you to this stage in life, what has helped to shape you, who you are as a person, a friend, a family member, a leader. What have you discovered about yourself? I think too, as an aside, sometimes when we're encouraged to make things personal, I don't want you to necessarily conflate this with telling a really sort of gut-wrenching tale, right? We're not necessarily looking for you to trauma dump, for lack of a better term. And I think if that's important to you, make sure how it sort of connects to, again, a story or sort of wrapping it up with some value or even lesson in there. Because we don't want you to be just sort of working through or sort of reliving these hard moments too. And so I don't want you to think that there's pressure to do that. Because that can be a really hard thing to work through, and especially in an essay and thinking about it in the context of college too. So again, not necessarily needing to put it all out there. I want you to feel comfortable with what you're writing too. And the third T is technique. The best advice when it comes to technique, technique is just essentially how you're writing, the form of your writing. Definitely follow the guidelines, right? So applications, there's so many of them, and reviewers are reading quite a lot. So we don't have time to read a lot of extra content. And you might even end up being sort of hurting yourself in doing so. I think it's important to keep in mind that sometimes reviewers might really only give a quick glance at the essay, which I think can be, kind of intense to hear, but that means you really want to condense your point down and really sort of, again, cut out that fluff, and get to the main meat and bones of what you're trying to say. So that way, even if someone's just taking a quick read at it, we can really get a sense of who you are sort of automatically. So if you're going to choose a Common App topic, really write about that topic. Or if your supplemental essay asks you a specific question, answer that question. Certainly follow the word limit guidelines. If it's set to, 650 or, 1,000 or whatever it might be, really stay within those guidelines. Again, that means there's not necessarily room for fluff. So stay to the point and edit out anything that doesn't necessarily serve your overall purpose. That could mean maybe not necessarily using those larger words to impress. Certainly don't dwell on one scenario if your point is already sort of, come across as learned or something like that. Be concise and coherent. Again, I think that can come through reading it out loud too, or maybe even reading it to someone else. So that way you can see if your story is coming across in a fluid and coherent way. Really open with the hook. I think this was one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten sort of in writing. You'll really want to grab your reader from the start. So start with an opening sentence or even an opening paragraph that immediately seizes the reader's imagination with a clear thesis statement. Lead with the core message of your essay. So that way, again, you're really kind of getting that captivation going and sort of activating. And again, sort of just really not being involved with much fluff in there. We do provide some creative freedom to the essay, right? When we're talking about the essay, we say, which is sort of said here too, we certainly encourage you to adhere to the rules of good writing, but we do look for applicants who are not afraid to take risks in their expression. So don't hesitate to use a writing style or method that may be outside the mainstream as you express a distinctive personal position in the essays you submit. So certainly keep that in mind. We understand again that this essay is likely going to many colleges or universities, so being overly creative might not hold up everywhere, unfortunately. I suppose maybe this is like, well, why do we ask this then? Well, we're just making sure that you are aware that you've got a little bit of this freedom here. I certainly think that good writing can sometimes mean purposefully, very purposefully, keyword there, throwing out correct grammar, just as much as it can look like adhering to grammar rules to a T. Look at some writers in history, you'll find that a lot of them maybe are creating their own rules or ways of writing that might be different from what you've learned too in class. So there's many different writing techniques that I didn't learn about until school. So there's things like stream of consciousness or even prose writing. Again, things that might be a little bit out of the mainstream, but again, keeping those other schools in mind. But I encourage you to find that way of writing, that flow of writing that works with your purpose and your topic and your tone. Again, having it be a natural extension, maybe of how you speak in person or something like that. That's something that I am really interested in, so I kind of digress there a little bit, but you should definitely proofread and submit a well-composed essay. Again, certainly don't over edit to the point where you're stripping your voice out of the essay. Certainly really keep and preserve your voice and keep that in mind when you're going through that editing process. Again, we're not expecting publishable prose or like Nobel Prize levels of thought. We're expecting the voice of someone who's more likely than not a teenager in high school. So please don't pretend, again, to be someone you're not. Your college essay isn't the best place to attempt comedy, for example, if that's not your shtick, just as much as it's not a place to attempt Freudian psychoanalysis or something like that. And really show, don't tell. So use language to your benefit here. The most engaging writing really shows or even paints a picture by setting scenes and providing anecdotes rather than telling the facts in a very clear-cut manner. And what do I mean by that? An example of telling would be something like, I am scared of the forest, right? But that doesn't necessarily give us too much else to think about. Maybe showing a sort of an example of showing how you can get across that you're scared of the forest without specifically telling us. You can write something like the forest was silent except for the distant sound of leaves underfoot. The canopy overhead blocked out whatever was left of daylight. The air smelt of mildew and decay as I tried to navigate my way home in the encroaching darkness. So really take us there with you, if you will. We'll really want to know the arc of your emotional journey. I think that's important to keep in mind when writing the essay, and is what really showing can help us take us there too. And also, I encourage you to end with a hook too. I really love the hook. So open with a hook, end with a hook, bring it all back home. You'll really want to wrap up your things nicely. Maybe end with a line, a sentence, a paragraph that really brings everything together because you want to have the last words that you're saying again. Keep your main point and focus in mind. So that way we can remember that too. And here's some things to consider and sort of keep in mind. And again, this one I think is maybe a little bit shocking, but your essay could really get anywhere from a 30-second to a 5-minute read. It really depends on how the rest of your application is holding up. So keep this in mind when writing your essay and really be sure to lead with your core message and minimize the fluff. Again, really think about that hook. Your readers, the people who are reading your application will vary, right? We're all bringing our own life experiences with us when we're reviewing and reading things. So with that, I caution you to proceed with caution. when using profanity. What could be acceptable with one reviewer may not be acceptable to another, or even from one school to the next. So it's probably just best to avoid it altogether. Of course, there's always exceptions, but again, thinking about the fact that someone is sort of reviewing this on the other end. Also avoid, again, gruesome content if possible. If it's really important to your story, then, certainly that can be unavoidable. But again, remember that there are people reading your essays with all sorts of stuff going on, right? Again, we're all bringing our own lives to the table here. And so this kind of, again, be mindful of how you're sharing or using your story, and avoiding maybe some things that are overly gruesome. And also, when thinking about technique in particular, really avoid submitting huge blocks of text or bolding every word. Sometimes we'll see essays where it's both, where it's a huge singular block of text and every word is bolded. Really consider the legibility of what you're submitting. And the same thing is true too. Sometimes like maybe there's like a double spacing or things like that. You want to make sure that your essay is really legible, even just in the form of it. So breaking things up into paragraphs can really help someone engage with your essay. And again, avoiding bolded text too, if it's all bolded, because it's really hard to read. So my final pieces of advice, and maybe to kind of wrap things up a little bit too. Again, I want to leave most of the time that we have here for any questions that you've got. Really take advantage of the essay. I think if anything you take out of this, it might be these points here. Usually kind of take advantage of that essay to add dimension where you have the most control. Don't overthink your topic. Build or start your story. Again, it can really be anything. I think it's important to keep in mind that the mundane is really telling as well. Really be authentic and honest, whether or not that's in your voice or within your topic or in the technique that you're using to write your essay. Don't over edit. Don't try to impress us. We'll be impressed by your authenticity in and of itself. You can search essays that worked. This is from John Hopkins, Hamilton Tufts College Essay Guy. But again, I recommend you to take some of those tips, but not necessarily copy things, because there's no specific formula that's going to work from one person to the next. And really, I recommend not using AI. Of course, like I think if you want to use it to maybe check some of your grammar, that's okay. But again, I would much rather see some mistakes in there than see something that is stripped of its personality. Again, we're really trying to get to know who you are. And so using AI can be a detriment to that because, again, it's using this very general or um, impersonable voice, right? Because it's coming from this one thing rather than just from you. And in general as well, just be concise and coherent, engage in honest self-reflection, include vivid details and anecdotes that really illustrate your point, with a lot of color and light in there. So with that, I want to, thank you all for sort of listening to my sort of points here. But I want to pass it over to any questions that you have. Anything that comes up maybe later on, I want to point out to you before I exit out of this slide that we're always available to chat admissions@risd.edu. And again, we'll be posting the recording of this too. But with that, I'll stop my share, so that way we can get to your questions. I've seen a few moments throughout the presentation where folks have been raising in their hands. Just want to let you know that we can't answer hand raises in this format. So please use the Q&A chat box function to answer your questions, and we'll sort of get to them that way.
Cool. Thank you, LJ. Thank you, thank you. The first question is, could your essay be written like a narrative or a poem?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think I would again use a little bit of caution. I mean, and maybe some more clarification would be helpful because I think most of the time when you're writing, especially for a college essay, you want it to be narrative, right? Like you're not trying to persuade us of anything or you're not trying to get really factual. And so the sort of character or, um, genre of writing is that it will be narrative. But if you're wondering if it can be like a fictional narrative, I would encourage you to use tact when thinking about that and make sure that it still is telling a story about yourself. Because again, you really want to put yourself first in this entire process, but you want to narrate a story about yourself, essentially. It can be a poem. I've certainly seen some poem-like essays that have been done really well. But again, I encourage you to think that this essay is being submitted to a wide range of schools. So what might be okay with some schools might not be okay with others. So I encourage you to take risks, but with a little bit of caution, which I think is kind of an oxymoron. But if you
Well,
can
also,
do it well and pull it off, I think, it can work out. But yeah.
yeah, I think on LJ's note, like if you have a background in poetry and you're confident can go to other schools, go for it. But maybe now is not the time to try your first poem at
Yes.
all.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Again, authenticity and honesty. So if it's something you've never done before, certainly don't bring it to the table now.
Totally. So does the Common App only allow me to submit one essay for all the colleges I apply to? Does this mean that I won't be able to customize an essay for each school?
Yes, that is true. And I think, in my own opinion, I think it's a little bit unfortunate. Especially because when it comes to like the portfolio, oftentimes we're thinking about how you can curate a portfolio specific to one school. The Common App personal essay is something that is sent to every school that you're applying to, as long as you're applying to them through the Common App. There's certain schools, of course, that don't use the Common App, and maybe we'll give you a space to write your essay through there. That could certainly be different, but the Common App personal essay is sent to every school that you're applying to. So there's no opportunity to personalize it or customize it to each school. So I encourage you to think about that too.
Cool. Will we need to include an artist statement alongside your slide room submission?
You do not need to include an artist statement along with your slide room submissions. I encourage you to let your art sort of lead itself. A lot of the time in the real world, we won't be able to be there to really stand up sounds is like a weird phrase to use, but we won't be there to really speak about our art. So most of the time, I think it's a good sort of challenge to let your art speak for itself. If you think it's really important for us to read your artist statement, you can submit an artist. There's like an additional information section on the Common App where you can put that in. But again, that's getting submitted to all your schools too. We don't have a specific artist statement requirement. Also because we're imagining that you'll get to school and get really honed in on your vision. So we're not imagining you to have a really clear idea of what kind of art you want to be making, or we want you to have an open mind when it comes to that, so that way you can get to campus and really understand the flexibility that might come along with being at an art school.
On a similar note, do we have to incorporate art or design into our Common App essay? Or is that encouraged in regards to going personal and authentic?
I definitely Well, it's funny to sort of put those things in a dichotomy, right? Like I hope whatever you're doing in art too is also personal and authentic. But I encourage you to use the essay space to highlight something else about yourself. Again, because you're applying to art school, or other art programs, we'll understand that you're interested in art or design, just based off of that premise alone. And then, of course, there's the portfolio there to support that interest and tell that story. So I encourage you to tell something else about yourself, so that way we can get a clear image of who you are, maybe how you sort of interact with the community and sort of what kind of voice you'd bring um, to that community or to that classroom environment. So it can be really helpful to use that essay space to discuss a different topic other than art or design.
Cool. Also, on a similar note, are there any topics you think they should avoid in their essay?
That's a good question. I think that one, at least for me, is a little bit hard to answer, because I think that can mean, because people can really talk about anything and do it well, right? There's always exceptions to any rules, but again, I encourage you to keep in mind that there are people reviewing or reading your essays, and so there's some things that might be a little bit hard for reviewers to hear, right? Like, again, we're all living this life, and I'm sure we all, like, there's people that you'll find will have similar stories to you. And if that's a difficult one, then again, it might be difficult for someone to read that. But again, if you really want to, right, if you're telling your story, that might be unavoidable. So I can't tell you to avoid anything. That's a good question. I think mostly I would encourage you to write about something else other than art. I think in general, the essays that I have found to be not like the most difficult to read maybe have been about the ones that are just purely about the creative process, because it feels like, again, a missed opportunity to showcase a little bit more about yourself, or understanding that you'll get to campus and be within a community. So being a little bit overly self-righteous, or I think at times, we all are really special, but sometimes we can be the only artist in the community that we're within. And I encourage you to keep in mind that you'll be coming to an art school where we're all artists. So, um, you know, thinking a little bit less about the self-righteousness of engaging with art too can be important.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I was just gonna say, if you do choose to write about art, just be very specific about it.
Yeah.
A lot of specificity, make it really specific to you as an individual, and then it's totally fine. I was just referring to, we don't want to see, I love art. Art's my favorite thing in the world, because that's true of all of our applicants, and it won't help your application stand out. But yeah, no other topics I can think to avoid. I know you mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's not necessarily something to avoid, but I know a lot of students are pressured to write about their trauma in their
Yeah.
essay, and their counselors and stuff. And please don't feel as though you need to do that. We love to see essays of all kinds, and yeah, absolutely. How long does an admissions officer spend reading your essay, and how impactful is the essay to your acceptance?
So that can certainly depend. I mean, I certainly touched a little bit on it in the presentation that, it really could be anywhere between 30 seconds to, I don't know, 5 or even maybe 10 minutes. There's certainly essays that I have in my personal sort of experience, maybe just taking a quick glance at. And that can be for a variety of reasons. Maybe the rest of your application is really strong. And so, not that you could say anything, but it would be okay. But I'm just sort of double checking that maybe the stuff in your essay is kind of supporting that. Or maybe if your essay is really engaging, sometimes I really like to reread things and get into it. It really depends on how, again, the rest of your application is coming together and holding up. Um, how impactful is it to your acceptance for RISD? Again, I think it falls a little bit in the middle, right? So for us, the most sort of impactful piece of the application is the portfolio. Then we really go to your academics, and then sort of letters of rec in the essay to kind of support that image that maybe the rest of the application is painting. But that will likely be different at colleges, or things that you're not applying to art programs for. Um, student or other colleges can certainly give a lot of attention and focus to the essay, since all you're submitting to them is that sort of academic record, your activities, letters of rec, and that essay. So it'll depend on what the context of the schools that you're applying to is.
Let me see. How in depth is too much for a topic in an essay that is intended to be quicker in review? Also, does RISD have a set word limit?
Well, the first for the latter half, the word limit will come from the common application. Again, I'm can't remember specifically the word limit, but there is a word limit on that. But that is listed in the common app too. How in depth is too much depth? I mean, I think something important to note is that the essay is not intended to be super quick, right? Like we can spend as long as or as little as we want in on the reading the essay. So I don't want you to think that it is inherently this sort of brief glance item, right? Again, that really depends on the rest of the context of your essay. I've certainly read essays that were really short and really impactful, maybe even just 1 or 2 paragraphs. I've certainly read essays that were a lot longer and equally as impactful. So I think it really comes sort of the depth is really up to you to sort of navigate your way through, and how much depth you need to tell your story, I think is exactly how much depth is needed. So again, sort of really making sure that you're adhering to those word limits. You can't go too in depth. So if you're really trying to tell this grandiose story, you've got to think about how to condense it down. Maybe if it feels a little bit flat, maybe you need to amp it up a little bit. But I've certainly, again, read essays that were short, ones that were a little bit longer, and they both felt like they were exactly the right amount of depth. So that really, again, depends on the topic or what you're writing and how you're writing it too. Really trying to cut down to the main points. Where does that get you?
Cool. The next one isn't necessarily a question. It was more of just a statement for everyone. There's an attendee who found that this year you might be able to change your Common App between schools. You just have to double check that each school is getting the right Common App essays. So yeah, we'll look into that on our end. That might be a more recent thing, but just to let everyone know that may be a possibility. And all of this information is on the Common App website as well. If I write in a cinematic narrative slash style by going into deeper meaning within the topic and ideas being presented, is this okay, or might it be hard to find the authenticity?
Again, I think that comes from the voice that you're using. If it's something that you really enjoy doing, and I think it's comes from your intention, right? If you're intending to do it because it's coming from a place of authenticity, then that authenticity is going to come across. If you're writing in a very sort of grandiose or cinematic, which I'm kind of equating to way, but it's not a way that you usually speak or write even to, then I think that will come off as a little bit contrived. So again, I think it'll really be dependent on your ability to bring that authenticity to it. So when we're talking about authenticity, of course, there's no specific formula to be authentic, right? So I think it's hard a little bit to give specific advice on how to write or where to write or deeper meaning and things like that, because it'll really depend on you. So as long as you feel like you're being honest and authentic, then I encourage you to go with that. But if you're doing it to come across a specific way, right? If you're doing it to get attention or sort of draw that sort of interest, and not because you're normally doing that, then I would encourage you to just think about that. It's kind of a non-answer, but
Yeah, well, it's a tough question without the essay in front of us.
yeah,
Let me see. What is the personality or character or set of values that RISD looks for from applicants?
that's a good question. I think or at least like what I'm drawn to is maybe like I don't know, a strong sense of self doesn't feel fully right. I think that can mean a lot of different things, which is maybe why I'm drawn to that term. Um, Really what we're looking to see again is that you can come to campus and just add to our community, right? So that maybe that means, um, I don't know, like some essays that I found to be interesting in the past were students finding interest in the mundane, because I think that means you can really be a little bit self-driven and be thinking for yourself and on your own without too much guidance, right? Because when you're coming to an art school, you'll be making a lot of self-directed work. And so making sure that you can engage in that personal drive and in that personal mission, I think is important to me. I think things like leadership are great to see, but I think that can mean a lot of different things, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone needs to be a leader, but again, I think it really boils down to that self-direction and drive, and strong sense of self, because that's, at least in my mind, how you get that kind of sense of drive, is being kind of confident and excited, in the work that you're making and the things that you're thinking about and how you're moving around. Um, so I think that can show up within a lot of different personality traits or characteristics. So those are like the main ones. Determination a little bit. Yeah, really that kind of sense of perseverance maybe, but again, that can show up in a lot of different ways too.
Yeah, and keep in mind that when you're if you're kind of confused about how to find your sense of self, look towards what other people have done. For example, for the portfolio, go to museums, go to galleries, get yourself out there and really looking at art. Same thing with the essay, start reading, think about all the different approaches you could take your essay with. Because oftentimes if we're not looking at other art or other essays, we're going to start off on like a more simple terms, working about on technique and having more formal observations. And oftentimes, the more we look and the more we read, the more ideas we'll have to pull from to create our own set of inspirations, essentially. Is it better to write an essay that's more to the point and very clear, or is it okay to write something like a story that's a little bit more abstract and has lots of imagery?
That's a good question. I suppose I'm having a hard time maybe separating the two, right? I think no matter what you're writing, it should be to the point and clear. Um, I think even within abstraction and maybe, creating some kind of imaginative story, painting a picture, that can still be clear and to the point, right? I think when we say to the point, it doesn't mean, hello, my name is LJ, I am determined, right? You can come to that point in a lot of different ways. I can say, oh, today I really wanted to like go find a beautiful flower, and everywhere I looked, I couldn't find a flower, so I kept walking for 30 minutes. And then somehow I turned the corner and there was my favorite flower. You know what I mean? Like I think there's a lot of ways to get to the point or be clear, but using anecdotes and using like the technique of writing to be a little bit creative. So I don't necessarily think that two things have to be separate. Um, and no matter what you're doing, we want you to be to the point and clear, right? We want you to have a strong um, guiding point. Like we want you to have something that you're working off of and that you have a really strong intention about, no matter if that is, kind of painting these large images and being a little bit maybe more frivolous in your story or topic, or if it's something that's a little bit more mundane too.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the student is referring to like avoiding metaphors and similes and that everything is
Ah.
very upfront and obvious, and that's not the case. If that is what you're referring to, I totally had the same thought as LJ. Like, is that two separate things, And but in case that's the case, it's great to use all of the more abstract writing techniques you've been exposed to.
Hmm.
Really, what's important is just making it your own. Is it okay if my essay ends by relating the topic to the reason you like to do art, or is it redundant?
I mean, I think that's okay. But I think as long as I think something that I always keep in mind when I'm writing is like, is this sentence necessary? I think sometimes, I don't know, I remember in class, like teachers being like, can you find the one sentence that doesn't need to be in this essay? So I think if it is, you want to make sure that the ending again sort of wraps everything up. So if it's kind of just a random end sentence, then maybe not. But if it's kind of wrapping everything up, then yeah, you're welcome to include that. But again, that'll sort of depend um, on the essay and sort of what else you've written.
Let me see. Sorry, I was typing an answer away. Would you say it's better to write your essay on a first person perspective or second person perspective? I'm going to assume this person means third person perspective. Or can the two work out if used right?
I mean, I think the two can, if you're using it right, then that could be a really interesting thing. But I think that would be kind of hard to do. And I'm not sure if you're asking this because sometimes like artist statements are written in the third person. Um, but I think something important to bring to the college essay is a sense of you don't want to be overly formal. And I think maybe doing it in the third person could come off as overly formal or because again, I like to think about it as like talking to someone, right? And if I'm talking to someone, I'm not going to talk in the third person. So Most of the time, authenticity is going to come across through the first person because we're not often talking in the third person. Maybe you are one of those people who does talk in the third person all the time, then certainly write your essay that way. But um, most of the time, I think first person perspective is gonna be the ticket there.
Cool. I have a similar question to can we write in the past or should it be in the present? Does it matter?
I mean, if you're talking about an event that happened in the past, you'll certainly want to write it in the past. But I think keeping everything in, again, that'll depend on what you're discussing. But I think keeping most things and relating it to who you are now is important. So that might mean like bringing some both of them, bringing the past into the present. But if you were lazy and now you're not, like you're not going to say I am lazy or something. You know what I mean? So I think it depends on what kind of story you're telling.
Cool. Well, we're all up to date with questions. I don't, if we see one come in last minute, we can take it. Otherwise, maybe we can start to wrap up just to be respectful of everyone's time. And we only have 2 minutes left anyway. So I'll put our email address in the chat if anyone has questions after today, and I'll pass it to you, Elchin.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all your help today, Zach. And thank you everyone for tuning in with us. Again, we're recording this, so it'll be accessible to you either through request or we'll put it on our YouTube channel as well. And don't hesitate to check out the rest of our application prep series webinars too. And our other webinars where we've got info about the portfolio, about our school a little bit more in depth as well. And all those can be found on our website too. So again, thank you all for tuning in with us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or evening, whatever time it might be where you're located. And we look forward to engaging with you more in some other capacity. See you guys.
Bye, everyone.